Welcome to the Question of Character podcast. I'm Bill Furlong, and thank you for joining us today. Today's topic is one that really brings very exciting news, and it's the introduction of the Virtuosity app. And today we have the perfect guest to discuss this very topic, the co-creators of the Virtuosity app. But first, let me again introduce you to my co-host and colleague, Dr. Mary Crossan. Mary is a distinguished university professor at Western. Her very impressive bio can be found in links to this episode, the Question of Character website, or at the Ivy Business School website as well. Mary, it's so nice to see you again.
Good to be here, Bill.
I'd like to also welcome today's very special guest. She's been a guest on our show twice before now, and one that actually had a huge personal impact on me, and that was the podcast we did around PABCs and core beliefs. I think it was episode 7. She has an undergraduate degree from Eastern Michigan University in kinesiology and a master's and PhD in kinesiology, psychology, and leadership from Western University in London, Ontario. The last time she was with us, she was a PhD candidate, and she is a candidate no more, so congratulations for that. She's also an excellent athlete. She's played Division I varsity golf in the US and also provincial level volleyball here in Canada. She is the world leader in researching and constructing programs for exercising and developing leader character. And her research interests also include sustained excellence and elite sport performance. She is currently a teaching fellow at the University of Oxford in England and working and teaching with the Oxford Character Project. And finally, and most relevant for today's podcast, she is, along with my co-host Mary Crossan, the co-creator of the Virtuosity app. She is Dr. Corey Crossan. How does that sound, Corey? Welcome back to the podcast. Thank you so much.
Thanks. It's so good to be here. And yeah, Doctor sounds amazing after those 4.5, 5 years of chipping away at it. So yeah, sounds good.
Well, congratulations. That's just wonderful news. And you're such a deserving candidate. And you've wasted no time in getting going on this. I think since the last time we've spoken to you, you've now got your PhD. You're teaching at Oxford. You're co-creating Virtuosity. For many people, Corey, that's a career, and you've sort of got that done in just a couple of very short years. So just a few words about our podcast before we get into it today. Several years ago, Mary and Corey started working on an app for the assessment, exercise, and development of leader character. Recall that character is something that you've actually got to develop. You can only develop it really through exercise. You can't develop just by thinking about it. And it atrophies when you're not using it, when you're not developing it, very much like physical exercise. And I think the vision that Mary and Corey had was to have a leader character coach with you pretty much everywhere you go, with certain bedrock principles. The app had to be science-based, and it also had to be something which was very accessible. I think in 2022, and Mary and Corey can talk about this a bit more, you rolled out a beta version of Virtuosity, and now it's basically live. We're going to talk to Corey and Mary today about an overview of the Virtuosity app, how it's working, maybe some examples of how it's being used and where it's being used. What are Corey and Mary learning about character development? Maybe some examples and stories around that. But this is an extremely exciting development that is fundamentally changing the approach to inculcating leader character in people and in organizations. I think it allows for scale, it allows for efficiency, and allows for effectiveness. And it also, I think, creates the opportunity to provide data for individuals and organizations that can potentially revolutionize personal development and organizational culture. And I'm not exaggerating. That's how important I think that this is. So let's get straight into it, Corey. Why did you create the Virtuosity app in the first place? What were you and Mary thinking?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think there's two really big sides to it. There's keying in on the development piece of character, but there's also this whole other strategic arm to it. So I'll start with the development piece, and then I'll hand it over to our strategy expert. So the development piece, if you go back actually a few, like 6 or 7 years, maybe 8 longer, when I finished my time at Eastern Michigan as a golfer, I really wasn't happy with who I was despite trying to, put my best foot forward. And when I fell into this leader character work and saw the leader character framework, a lot of the missing puzzle pieces kind of came together and started to see this roadmap to being able to target areas of development. And I think something that was really missing in a lot of behavioral development stuff that I was doing prior is not seeing the full holistic way that these dimensions work together. And so in sport, a lot of times we see this overweighting of courage and drive, underweighting of temperance, humility. So I started to really see a huge impact of how this helped me. And with my exercise science background, I already had a head start on the daily practice that it really takes to strengthen and develop character. And so that's what really actually started my whole PhD research, was creating this program that focused on this daily practice to strengthen character. And as I was doing a lot of my leadership development research, as I started my PhD, I really started to see a lot of the gaps in this. What you see a lot in leadership development are these one workshop programs where you have one workshop maybe once a year, once every 3 months, not too frequently. And it's just so many people would feel inspired in the workshop, but as soon as they left the workshop, they really had very little tools, support, encouragement, community to continue that development. So that was a big hole that we wanted to fill with the app, is to make this accessible, a daily practice. And I think the second piece was to really make it customizable. So like I was saying in sport, where I felt like there was kind of this blanket approach to everyone had to be more courageous, everyone had to have more drive, but what I needed was more humility, more temperance. And so the app enables that to be customized to each person. It allows them to become more aware of what their character is instead of just being subject to this blanket approach if they're on a team or within an organization. And then the last piece is really this app being able to build and support a community. So we have this big collaborative aspect within the app, and character development is really hard to do on your own. So it's trying to build this character community together so that we can learn with one another. And so I think those are the three big reasons that started the desire to create this development app that makes it more accessible, more daily, and customizable. But the strategic aims are really big too. So I'll pass it over to Mary to cover those.
Yeah, it's interesting because as the way Corey talked about it, there are things that I certainly wasn't imagining that would come in the app until Corey came on board, because bringing the exercise science perspective on habit development was not my expertise. And then I could see, as we collaborated over time, the very things that she spoke about. When I imagined getting into this, and it's been many years now, that I knew we needed to do this, because the gap that I saw was the fact that we know character development to be incredibly important. Bill, as you started it out, we know culture is a reflection of the character of the individuals in the organization. We know that we want to embed character into our HR practices, thinking about selection, performance management, understanding how we promote people in organizations. We need to connect it into things like risk management and EDI and purpose of organizations and strategy. All of that depends on individuals understanding what character is and developing it. I have spent close to 40 years in the business school working in the area of strategy and leadership, watching organizations work with all of these issues, but never having the tools that they need to fundamentally understand and develop the character of the individuals, right? We have that competence language that goes on. So the gap over time that we saw needed to be filled is, whereas Corey started to talk about, it's the knowing, doing, being gap, right? The knowing, well, first of all, what is character? And how do we understand what that is? The doing part being, I've got to start to practice it. And the being or the becoming part meaning, this is a habit. What we're discovering for sure about this, it takes tremendous subject matter expertise. Like we have the leader character practitioner course that helps people who are looking at embedding this in organizations, but even they go, well, how do we scale this up in organizations? Like, how do we replicate ourselves? How do we stay current about it. And so Corey and I, as researchers in the field, as practitioners, our job is to be relevant, to be current, to make sure that what we wanted to do was put in the app everything we know about how to develop character so that individuals can be able to use it to support the development. And with that, organizations can leverage it and achieve the benefits that we know that they can.
You've talked in the past, Mary, about how individual character development is at the atomic level. In other words, we have to create that character development across the organization. You mentioned before scaling, and in the past, I think scaling was done with things like maybe multiple workshops or workshops that were done, and you'd have to sort of replicate those, and increasing sort of the sophistication and degree of engagement with people as we went along. This app actually replaces all of that. As Corey had said earlier, this is customizable piece to it. And it uses all of those elements of exercise science that Corey, first of all, lived and then studied. And then serendipitously, it intersected with the work that you were doing and the time of life that Corey had found herself in and looking to grow and develop, post her undergraduate education. It's just a remarkable story of how all of that has come together into one place at this time. It's almost like if you take any one of those pieces away, we're not nearly as far. You're not nearly as far ahead. You and Corey are in what this is doing.
And I would add, Bill, a piece that we discovered strategically around this is how organizations are really hamstrung. I call it around real estate for curriculum. It's whether organizations or academic institutions. So it's not just the subject matter expertise, but it's where do we do this? When do we do this? How do we do this? And a lot of times you're trying to fit these things into curriculum and people don't know, right? Again, it's the subject matter expertise. They don't know how to do it. And where we are trying to treat it more as that roots of the tree system that underpin all activities of the organization, and that it happens, it's in somebody's palm of their hand. They do it where they are in the world, when they are, different time zones. It's bite-sized chunks. You're not trying to find hours where people can get together for development work. So we're kind of releasing a lot of the constraints, I think, that happened around development. And the other piece I would add on it, Corey will talk about it a little bit later, is there's not a lot of evidence base in leadership development. It is, we run these workshops and then we call it smile factor. Did they like it? And one of the strengths coming out of Corey's dissertation on this is the latent growth modeling, the statistical methods that you can use to actually track how the development of character affects key performance indicators. And so there's this other, incredibly important benefit around that. And Corey will also talk about a strategic element about real-time tracking. Again, we don't even think about this in leadership development, is being able to understand the pulse of our organization with respect to where we are on these issues. It's really quite, let's call it, there's the advancement in using app-based learning, and then tying that to character-based learning just gets you that kind of additional distance.
I mentioned off the top that it is revolutionary, and I think it really is. And that word, I use that word very carefully, because so much of leadership development and education just doesn't have those elements of real time or being able to track progress and growth. So let's, it's pretty exciting. So let's now actually go straight to the app, and maybe Corey, you can start to walk us through. So give the viewers and ideally the listeners a sense of what's on the screen and what we're talking about here, and walk us through what the app looks like and its various sort of important features.
Yeah, so I've put some screenshots together to essentially take us through a bit of a user story, I would call it. And so I'll take us through what the user can expect when they come into the app, and just keep it quite high level at this point, and you can follow up if there's any questions. So essentially, as someone comes into the app, they are immediately prompted to take the leader character insight assessment. So that's the leader character model that we always refer to. There's the validated measurement tool. So they are prompted to take that, but it has a bit of a different scale with a 0 to 10 scale, because this is a development program. So it's easier for us to see a little bit more improvement or change over time. And as soon as they take that, they immediately get results. And so they will see the 11 dimensions here. And if you scroll down, you would see the 62 elements below that. And we also have a screen that shows the virtues and vices, so how balanced your character looks. I don't have that on me right now, but yeah, you get this. We call this your character profile. So that's kind of the onboarding. The last piece to the onboarding, actually, there's two more pieces, is you also, we encourage you to add a partner to the app. And this is a huge piece of the program where has so many different components. One is developing your own self-awareness, and there's a lot of opportunity to use the insights with your partner to have more discussions about your character and your partner's character. So you're also observing character in other people, which helps you understand character more about yourself and in general. And then, of course, the accountability piece is a big one. So here you can see that the partner black ticks here, this represents how your partner is assessing you. So you can compare your own assessment with your partner. And then you can also see that there are white ticks. So this represents your organization's average results, or your group or your team, however you've registered your team. And I think this one is a really important one because it helps you see perhaps what your strengths are compared to your teammates so that you can offer more support there. But it also shows what your team might be stronger at so that you can look to them for more help.
Now you've got this sense of not only an assessment of yourself, but also this growing awareness, because I would think that this starts to bring the leader character framework alive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think this leads into essentially what we'd call a weekly program. And what we really hope that these results do is help give the learner a sense of what they want to focus on developing first. So instead of just, like I said, following a program that works for most people, that they can actually see what are their weaker behaviors that they can focus on that they know is going to make a difference in their character. And so what they do at the beginning of each week is they choose a focus behavior to focus on. And based on that, they get a series of a very small lesson, a set of daily exercises, and then a set of daily assessments, which are really there to support a reflective process that we know will support character development. And all of those are fed back at the end of the week. Let's see if I can find it. Here you can see in the middle, we call it the weekly insights report. And so this whole real-time feedback, that kind of thing. I was really inspired by it from my time in athletics, where you're always getting feedback. You're rarely training without a very specific target or goal. And so this idea of having all of these reflective assessments built into the app that feed back to actually help you and guide you further was a big focus in the app. So you have these insights to draw on, and you can see here that you have in the middle, comparing your previous week to your current week. And then you also have your partner assessing you. And this is where my mom and I were partners in the app. And almost every week there are differences in our weekly insights. And so we use that a lot for discussion and insight. And it's been really valuable to work through some of those differences in how we've assessed each other.
When you're choosing a partner, Corey, is it important to pick someone that, like, what are the attributes, I guess, when you're thinking about picking a partner?
Yeah, that's a good question. We've had it a few times, and I think there's a lot of different reasons that you could have a partner. The first one could be choosing someone that you know sees you a lot and can easily observe you, so that you feel like you're getting quite good feedback because they can observe you easily. The second reason could be like a mentor-mentee relationship. So you might not observe each other extremely well frequently, but that you are connected through the app and that you do have the ability to assess each other. And this creates a good opportunity to have really good conversations with each other outside of the app. The point with the partnership isn't to observe everything perfectly, but it's, if you can't observe something, following up and asking that partner more about how they did that week in that certain area. So it really is trying to take the app and bring it into real life to, I would say, create more of these robust character conversations and give a lot of food for thought, I guess, between you and your partner.
And would it be important as well for that person to, I mean, clearly there's a need for that person to be committed to the process. Is there also a need, or I guess it would be better if they're familiar with the leader character framework and they're also themselves on Virtuosity?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So to be the partner, you do have to be in the app, in the Virtuosity app. And I mean, they could be new to the leader character framework, and the lessons are built to take a very new person through the app. And then, of course, if one knows a little bit more about leader character than the other, then you can use that as a teaching process.
And when you think about customizable, you've mentioned you can pick the one you want, the weaknesses you need to work on. But I think it's also something you can actually pick the one you're interested in. So it might be that the weakest one is, I don't want to deal with that one for the moment. Here's the second weakest one, but I've got a real interest in that, and you can pursue that one instead. So it truly is customizable in just about every way that you can think of. So that occurs then on a weekly basis. How does that then progress from a weekly basis to something, over months and potentially even years?
Okay, so the third screen here, this is what it looks like when you've taken the big leader character insight assessment on a periodic basis. So you actually start to see changes in your character over time. I think it can be quite hard to move character, and a lot of the aims around this program are really around the reflective insights that you get. And so you might see some dimensions move over time, but to be patient, because it really is difficult to develop your character. So I would definitely say this requires a lot of patience, and it really is a lifelong journey. And that's how we've set up the app. We have lessons that will last a lifetime. So we've set everyone up for this, and yeah, I would encourage patience throughout this process.
I mean, that's one of the things, that there's an enormous amount of depth within each dimension and within each element in terms of the nature of the exercises and the resources, which you may or may not talk about. Again, there's so much content here that we could discuss, but there's an enormous amount of content based inside the app itself that goes beyond simply, I shouldn't say simply, but beyond the awareness and development. But also there's an education itself built into the app that gives you access to all of the, not only this podcast, but also various articles and other resources that people can use to learn about leader character as well. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And I think that does lead us into perhaps the last feature in the app. It's just the library. And this was really back when we were starting out the app. One of the practitioners in the leader character course said that they wanted to live in the app. And so beyond this weekly program that we have extensive resources in here. And so it really is built to allow someone to live in the app. It really does have everything that we know in here. And a big thing that we've also seen this to be really beneficial for is for people who want to be training other people on leader character. So whether those are coaches, educators, another train the trainer of some sort, so that when they learn how to use this app, that they have all those resources still there that they can use as they help others develop their own character.
So now the nature of, we just talked a little bit about the reflective element of character development, but we've also talked before about how character is really something which is not developed by thinking about it, you've got to be doing. How does the app sort of encourage you to actually actively change your character?
Yeah, so everything built in the app is meant to be a doing. So the reflective process is doing reflection. Going through the library is actively learning. The biggest thing, my personal favorite, is the actual exercises that we have in the app. So we have daily exercises that actively get you practicing to exhibit whatever your focus behavior is. So this week I was focusing on curious. So we had different prompts for people to be curious about. And in curiosity, typically we find people only being curious in some parts of their life. So our prompts this week were getting people to be curious about areas that they probably wouldn't necessarily be curious in. And so, yeah, the exercise piece is the really fun one.
And so, for another example would be is I'm working on interconnected, and so Monday is to reach out to a peer, Tuesday is to reach out to a mentor, Wednesday is to reach out to a mentee, and then at the end of the week, pick 2 to 3 people in the following week that you want to reach out to. So, although there's this reflective piece, there really is this challenge to take a particular action that causes and creates these new habits, which is really what we're trying to get at, right? People ingraining new habits into their daily lives in an intelligent and an intelligent way, an intentional way, such that those new habits specifically are focused on the dimension that you want to strengthen with.
Yeah, exactly. And I think not to go too far away here, but when I look at a lot of exercises out there around being resilient or being curious or this or that, when I look at the template for that, a lot of times people are saying that you need this other behavior and this other behavior to be resilient. And so that gets at our leader character framework, where of course all of these behaviors have to work together to support you being resilient. But what we've tried to do in the app is actually really isolate what does resilient mean on its own. What is that very specific behavior, so people can have this really really focused approach to developing that specific behavior. And then we are always drawing connections to, if you are trying to be more resilient, that maybe you do need to focus on your drive to support your energy levels, or you do also need to support your collaboration to have those support systems. But yeah, we're very focused with the exercises so that they are specifically exercising that virtue.
Right. Now, we could talk for a long time about the personal development piece of that. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about with respect to the personal development side, or can we talk a little bit about how it works from an aggregating sort of corporate pulse perspective?
Yeah, I think good to move on. Mary, is there anything else that you do want to add on the personal side?
I just was looking, trying to think about any screens that you had that you might just want to maybe show a visual of, just to give an example of some things that people would see. That might be helpful.
Yeah, I can just run through it quite quickly. I mean, we don't have all the screens in here, but this is the home page that you see. And so it shows you your weekly plan, and this is here to support the habits that we think you can cultivate to develop your character. And it looks like a lot, but it's actually not too much. I would say it's about a 2 to 5 minute investment of time. You could extend that to an hour if you wanted to be in the resources section. But I put it in a way similar around exercise science, where if you put a little bit of investment time into the gym each day, say it's 30 minutes or an hour, you have that investment time, but then it transforms the other 23 hours that you have during the day. You feel so much better, et cetera, et cetera. And so with the app, the little time that you are putting into it, it's not that you can't spend any time, so you have to put in a little bit of time, but it's meant to prime and transform the rest of your day, so that character's at the forefront of all your judgment, decision making, that kind of thing.
Bill, even though I'm a co-developer with Corey about this, it's shocking to me how much functionality there is in the app. Like, even things I go, I didn't even realize we could do that, because Corey and I knew the things, like we knew the content, we knew the things, and for the last couple of years, Corey's been on the weekly calls with the app developers, which we find are just phenomenal. And when I look at the functionality in the app, it's just like one of these things that it just goes deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. So what Corey's really showing here is quite the tip of the iceberg about what's possible. So we're finding that really, really neat. It's kind of like a, built a Ferrari that you just need to drive to the grocery store for 5 minutes. It's a little bit like that.
There is an enormous amount of potential in this app. It's just remarkable. And as you said before, at the very top of it, Mary, the top of the episode is talking about how revolutionary this is of having something that's real time and customized, linked to science around leadership. And now Corey's going to talk about how you can sort of do pulse checks. All of this, I'm not aware of anything else, any app that delivers this kind of functionality. It is truly remarkable.
Yeah, so this is what we call the organizational dashboard. It can be your team dashboard, however you want to organize your group. And so anyone has access to this within your organization. If you're the admin, let's call it, you can give as much access or as little access to this as you want. And there's a few things on the dashboard that I'll go over. The first one is down here around the average strength of dimensions. So those are taking the 11 dimensions in the leader character framework and aggregating them from all individuals that have taken the assessment. And you can filter them based on different levels, departments, locations, etc. So that will actually change the data immediately as you click on those. And then it has all of these 62 behaviors on the right here. And I will just point out, no surprise here with this particular group, that temperance is the lowest. It is always the lowest, no matter which group we do this with, across context, culture, age. It always seems to be the lowest. And we could do a whole episode on that, but I'll leave it there for now. You'll also see how many people you've invited to use the app versus how many people are logged in, which is always nice to see. And then you have your average character score. So as people take the test, you can see over time, is that overall score changing? So these things will update as people retake the test. I think the part that excites me the most is the mood score and the performance score here. So in the app, as part of the daily assessment, we ask people in the app to assess their performance and their mood each day. And so as they submit those each day, this dashboard is updated every single day. Every single time someone submits an assessment, it's updated. And so as a leader in your organization or in your team, you can have a pulse check, a real up-to-date understanding of how your team's doing, how their mood is, how their performance is. And again, this is something that we did a lot in athletics, where we'd show up to the court, especially in volleyball, and our coaches would ask us, we'd have all these funny exercises around like different hand signals and stuff like that. But just, it's really important to know how we're doing, so that you can treat other people in a way that makes sense, depending on how their week is going or their day is going.
But that just strikes me as an enormously powerful tool for organizations to get, again, a real-time pulse check of the mood that's going on inside of their organization day in and day out, whether or not the organization's feeling. I mean, imagine what that would have looked like during COVID, like as we sort of led into COVID and all the uncertainty, and then the switch, and as we sort of switched from being at the office to home. That kind of information would have been absolutely invaluable to leaders and organizations as they make those changes. And that's going to always be the case. So it's a remarkably powerful insight and data.
Mm-hmm. And I think like taking that a step further too is, of course, linking it to the character results. So being able to see why mood is doing good or poor compared to the character profile that you have here, and being able to target those in workshops or whatever you might be doing with your team, or bringing it more into your everyday discussion. And this is the last piece here, where it helps visualize this virtues and vices phenomenon that we always talk about, where if you have weaker behaviors, it can cause your stronger behaviors to manifest as excess vices. And so ideally we want to be strengthening character overall. We never want to be diminishing any of these strong behaviors, but trying to make sure that this temperance, you can see visually how deviated it is from the average score. And so trying to bring that closer to at least the average, so that it's not causing, what do we have on the right here, transcendence, to manifest as that excess vice.
We've talked in the past on some episodes and just privately amongst ourselves about how character, if understood on an organizational basis, can actually be a precursor of risk management. And so I'm thinking about financial institutions where there's an absence of temperance, an enormous amount of drive. And I mean, how many situations have we seen in FIs where that just gets these organizations into an enormous amount of trouble? And again, here is a metric that's real time that can start to give people in an organization a sense of where these imbalances lie and what risks that might actually turn up. I mean, and and you could actually see the opposite. An organization that was a sales organization for perhaps, the exact same thing. Temperance was low and drive was high, or the reverse. Maybe temperance was really high and drive was really low, and you're wondering, why are my sales not doing anything, right? So it becomes very context dependent as you can sort of see how imbalances can create issues and how you would strive for balance. But beyond the idea of just simply diagnosing it, the character work and the Virtuosity app then gives you the tools to actually start to address it. And that, again, is fundamentally different, I think, from any other leadership genre or any other leadership types that I think we've seen in the past. So really some examples of, I'm not quite sure, maybe it's too early days, but do you have anything in the way where a few examples of maybe people are using Virtuosity and it helps a person, an individual, sort of develop a particular element? I mean, you've already sort of given a mini example of yourself, but have there been others that you've seen in use that can help illustrate the value of the app?
I think just to start, back to the research that we did, there is a lot of empirical evidence coming out of the programming that I did with Virtuosity. And so what we found through the latent growth modeling is that, again, the higher program engagement you had, the more character-based leadership development you could see. So that manifests as better judgment and decision making. And we also looked at, we in character, a lot of times we talk about flourishing. And so how we tried to measure that were through different metrics like performance, mood, quality of interactions. And so all of those from an empirical standpoint, those who had greater character development also saw greater changes in their performance, in their mood, in their quality of interactions. And something we've talked about before as well is also the core beliefs. So in the app, we look at how their core beliefs are in terms of how they view themselves, how they view others, and how they view the world. And so we see those strengthened and become more constructive over time with character development. And so, I mean, going way back, I think one big part for me, especially coming out of golf, was this, I had a lot of anxiety. And so when I looked at my relationship to the world, it seemed like quite a scary place as someone going through having a lot of anxiety. And so as I tried to focus on strengthening my temperance and my humility, I've definitely seen my relationship to the world become a lot more constructive. I see it more as filled with opportunity. It doesn't mean that I don't have some anxiety here or there, but it is much more constructive now that I've focused on specific virtues that I know will strengthen my character.
I was listening to you and I thought, rather than, necessarily sharing an example, the one thing that I thought, where do we often put our investment in leadership development, and where do we think performance will come from? And it's not character development, it's competence development, right? And so my mind was going back to the fact that in my experience, I look at myself, I look at you, I look at Bill, I think we're high-performing individuals. I don't see myself as any more competent than anybody else, right? It's that I've got a lot of the same competencies. When I credit my good fortune in the last certainly 15 years of working in this space, and then I would say good fortune of having been in an environment that had inadvertently cultivated my character and I didn't even know it. I look at my flourishing as you described it, Corey. Competence was necessary, but entirely insufficient to get to the kind of well-being and performance that I think I've enjoyed in my life. And I think our commitment around putting the app together was to quite frankly be able to bring to the world an approach and an exercise approach that would allow for every individual, a level playing field to say, you may not be able to do this or that or be in this, go to this school or that school around competence development, but the horsepower for understanding performance and well-being is in this place that's accessible to everybody. And what we're finding is not only are we looking at it in organizations and in universities, but our desire is to keep pushing this down and even making it accessible at the most junior levels, right? Even young children in as many parents say, gosh, my role as a parent is ultimately about developing the character of my kids, and who gave me a roadmap to do that? So I think that those are more the generic stories that I think about, is that this has been transformative to people to find within themselves something that they can tap into that they never understood was possible, and then just see these incredible benefits to their own personal and professional lives.
We've talked a little bit about how an individual sort of starts on this. We've talked about what are the important elements, the idea of consistency, the idea of having a partner, the idea that for an organization to engage in this, it creates so much more than simply a number of individuals starting to work on their own character. It creates this holistic perspective and allows the organization to grow and to learn and to understand with the information that it gets. Any other insights that we want to talk about? The next place I wanted to go really is as our viewers and listeners are hearing us today, people will be saying, okay, well, what do I do next? Like, where do I start with this as an individual or as someone inside of an organization? Anything from someone who's in HR, someone who's running a team, to a CEO, to a board member who says, I'm really interested in getting engaged with this for my organization, and or someone who's just listening at home and thinking, I love the leader character, I love what it's doing, I'd love to start to engage in this personally. What's the next step for people in those positions to take?
I think that there are a lot of different options, but the one kind of, I would say, route that we've been taking with a lot of organizations is this pairing up of, starting as many people as you can on your team. So whether you're starting at the leadership level, or if you can get more people started at the same time, that you are starting this daily practice and this training piece, and pairing it up with these, let's call it monthly workshops, where, for example, the month of September, we're focusing in the app on developing our humanity. And then we meet at the end of September to talk about how that's going, and then support or facilitate conversation about the things that they think that this is helping them see how they can make changes in their organization. And so, like I said, like risk management, performance management, I've heard a lot of organizations wanting to focus on strengthening trust in their organization, which character can certainly do. So the pairing up of this kind of bottom-up approach, I would say, that comes from the Virtuosity app, but then also the top-down in terms of facilitating these discussions. And Bill, I think it was you that said this before, that if you are asking your whole team to develop their character, but that these people aren't seeing changes happen from the top to keep up with the individual character development changes, it's going to be really demotivating and feel like you're not actively supported by your leaders. So I really think that matching up the top down and the bottom up process alongside each other is really important to move forward.
Right, the idea of an integrated approach. Mary, what you've seen as well, and to what Corey had just spoken about, any thoughts on that? And I mean, we're going to be providing links in the notes to the episode as to, I think there's a Virtuosity links that we can provide to people so you can go straight to the app. Any other thoughts there, Mary, on that?
Yeah, Bill, we wanted to make this, we're at a stage on leader character development and application that I think we have every tool in the toolbox that an organization needs. That was sort of the I think the goal, I think we underestimated 15 years ago. I would never have imagined the need for an app 15 years ago, but when you're talking about something that's habit development every day, this interconnected nature around what character is, we're at that stage that everything is available. So all somebody needs to do is make the contacts, and we can start to help people and kind of walk them through the next steps. Could be a demo about what it is. We could talk with them about their organizational needs and sizes, and that process goes pretty quick in organizations. A recent organization we were with, it was like 2 conversations and we're launching with the select group of people that they want in their organization. So it's a pretty seamless process.
Now, one question which maybe I should have asked a bit earlier, but I think comes up time, and people would actually be thinking about it, is that when you're looking at the data that's combined in there, a lot of this is quite personal. So from the perspective of an individual user, how do they get comfortable that their data is not going to be shared? And then when you start aggregating data up inside an organization, again, how can people get comfortable that this data is not going to be something which they're going to be able to be identified or singled out, and that it's really something which is beneficial to the larger group? Any thoughts on, I'm sure you must have actually bumped into that issue already, and how have you sought to address it?
Yeah, we've had, especially as researchers, we know how important it is to have anonymous, to protect this data and make sure that people, especially with the app, how vulnerable people can be in the app. And so this was one of the conversations we had early on with our developers, just to make sure that all of the processes are set up, that this is, all of their data is anonymous, and that it's, we have all of those measures set up. I think we have had some questions about, if I'm an employee within a team or organization, is my boss or my manager going to be able to see my data? And the answer is no. They won't be able to see your data. It's just the group level data. And so on that dashboard that I did show, we actually have a minimum number of people set, so that you can't even actually get too low, that you can kind of start to figure out what people's character is. So we have all of these protections in place. And I think something that we didn't quite get to before that I will just loop in here, if my boss doesn't know what my character is, then what's the point of them having group level data? And I think around like performance management or these discussions, it's really about being able to have conversations because you've been using the app with each other. So it deepens the conversation and enriches the conversation. So if you want to share your character profile with your boss, you can do that, but nothing in the app is going to be tied to your name or individually shared with anybody else. That will be your choice to share it with other people.
And I would add, just to use, take that, it just reminded me, take it a step further too. The notion of having this data ultimately protected is paramount. Everybody needs to know that's absolutely paramount. And that one of the things, though, that it allows you to do, I'm reinforcing, Corey, the trigger around performance management, is that the usefulness around leadership development in character development here is less about thinking about some end number of what somebody's character is, but it is all of that incredible, engagement that people have in understanding character and having the quality of conversations that they will have. So one of the studies we have underway is, so you've got the app in place, people are using it, and the hypothesis we have is that the development of character will reduce unconscious bias and improve performance management. Meaning that we expect that just people engaging in this will affect those conversations that they have. That they rather than people looking at performance management as, I got a tick the box exercise at the end of the year and everybody's dissatisfied with it, that we actually take pride in the investment that we have in coaching and mentoring that will go on. And then as we look at that, improves those processes. So where we see the value of this is not where a lot of people look at, how do I measure this to do that? to reward somebody or whatever it happens to be, but rather keep our eye on the very development of character itself. The roots of that tree system nourishes and affects all of the other, competencies that the individual has and the practices of the organization.
Mary, you talked in the past and early on, you mentioned, leadership is dispositional, not positional. And this app allows the entire organization to engage in that process that I think not only transforms people, but also transforms organizations in a way which is, again, groundbreaking when you think about the practice of leadership to date. The other thought is you mentioned earlier that when people go through a leadership workshop, I think you may have mentioned it as well, Corey, everyone walks out the door and that was really interesting, that was great, I feel really good, and then over the next few days or weeks it dissipates and it's almost like you never took the workshop in the first place. And because of the presence of this with you all the time, it's like taking a new workshop each week, in particular if you switch over to a different dimension. And that sense of novelty and newness never leaves you. And as we've talked in the past about micro moments, now you approach your micro moments each day with the character at the forefront of your mind, as opposed to something you're trying to remember in a workshop you did 3 or 4 months ago, and you're not going to remember it in a moment. So it has this capacity. I mean, the leader character framework itself has this capacity to transform lives. This app actually becomes the mechanism and the tool by which to actually practically do it on a day-to-day basis.
And Bill, I would say for myself, and I am entirely grateful to Corey, because there's no way this would have happened without the heroic efforts and expertise, Corey, that you bring into it. And I feel personally, even though I've been in this space for 15 years, the amount that I work on this like daily, and I'll just give you today, like my today conversation about this. I'm looking in the app, I'm just picking up here right now, Corey, the moods that every day I reflect on, where am I at today, right? Here's the list. And these are instruments that, assess mood. Interested, alert, attentive, excited, enthusiastic, inspired, proud, determined, strong, active, distressed. So now we get on the negative ones. Upset, guilty, ashamed, hostile, irritable, nervous, jittery, scared, afraid. And the interesting thing for me, on my pulse check every day, it's very rare for me to be picking up on these negative moods. And of course, we pick up those negative moods, right, that become chronic for people. So what do I notice? Well, irritable is coming up for me on a few days. And as Corey knows, I've got a few kind of very stressful things that go on in the midst of what's already a, massively challenging day. So what am I going to do about that? Well, it gets me thinking about the judgment that I have and the choices that I make to be able to take that, irritable check mark and say, I've got control over this thing. I've got choices to make. I've got judgment. And on the flip side, what I did notice is often when I was looking at things, I wasn't necessarily picking up enthusiastic as much as I was. And what I discovered about, I'm excited, I'm inspired, I'm proud, enthusiastic. Well, why is that? And what I realized is that it's almost like I get into the mode of how I operate, and not, even though transcendence is something that's a strong character dimension for me, it may not be playing out as strongly as it needs to be. And if I look at the physiology, affect, behavior, cognition pieces underpinning that, and the affect regulation of that, I'm going, these are huge. Now, let me just take that example, because I just shared it with somebody today, is I was talking about my ability to be accountable around the highly stressful activity that I'm facing. Because I could just punt on it. I mean, I could get rid of my irritability by just saying, you know what, whatever, I can't do anything more about that. And I talked about the fact that I think my obligation in society is to actually I can do this. And I'm not trying to be a hero about it, but I'm saying, what is the strength of character that I need to have to be able to act on this situation and bring the accountability that I know I need to bring to this. And the only way I do that is through the daily reflection that I have about this, to say, what do I need? How do I need to develop this muscle? Often it'll be a conversation then with Corey about, here's what's going on. So my partner helps me out. So I want to help, the listeners of this understand that, yeah, it's a lifelong journey. And to me, it's perhaps the greatest asset in my life around my own learning and development. So it's something like, if nothing else, I'm like, okay, this is exactly what I need in my life. But more importantly, I've often said to Corey, I do feel, I could leave this planet and I know we'd be in good shape because we have left everything we know about how to develop character embedded in this app. So to me, it's hugely satisfying.
This has been a very exciting episode, and I'm not exaggerating when I make the claim that Virtuosity is truly revolutionary. It keeps leader character at the forefront of your mind and your everyday actions, and your character strong and strengthening. You become aware of the opportunity for micro moments and to make these character-infused decisions that will improve your outcomes and improve your well-being. So thank you again, Mary and Corey, for all the work that you've done on this. An awful lot of, thousands of hours have gone into these, and with you and other collaborators, and you've imagined something and brought it to life. Corey, specifically, thank you so much. You've been such a friend and a key contributor to the Question of Character podcast. I think this is episode 15 and you've been there for 3 of them. And in particular, episode 7, where you talked about the PABCs. I mean, it was truly a pivotal point in me in my life, thinking about functional versus dysfunctional core beliefs. And I hope you come back again because you've got so much to tell us. So thank you again, Corey.
It's so nice to be on the podcast with the both of you because it really does feel like home just chatting about this stuff. So thanks for having me again.
It is truly a pleasure, Corey. So if you like what you've heard today, please feel free to share with your friends and your colleagues. If you really like what you've heard today, then please feel free to subscribe to our podcast, Question of Character. We also have a website called questionofcharacter.com where we will be posting various resources and articles, and in particular, links to any diagrams, schematics, or other items referred to in today's podcast, in particular, some elements and links to the Virtuosity app. It's also a place where you can send us your comments, your thoughts on what you've heard, and any suggestions you might have for future podcasts. We'll also post links to the Ian O. Inatowicz Institute for Leadership at Ivy Business School, where there are even more resources, articles, and information about the Ivy Leader Character Framework. Thank you so much, Mary and Corey, and goodbye to all. Have a good day. Bye-bye.